So welcome everyone to our April webinar. Today we'll be talking about preventing bike theft. Um, we have three guest speakers today with us. So as part of our agenda, we'll have Zach Mulholland. We'll be going through the introduction, going over bike theft as an issue. Then we'll have Shawne Martinez come in and talk to us about how to lock your bikes, what to look for in both where you're locking your bike and what kind of locks to be using. And then Shane Rhodes will be talking about the registering your bike as well as a bike parking assessment tool that is being used in the Eugene Springfield area. Then I'll go over some resources that we have for folks, and then we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion, and then we'll move on to our announcements at the end. So to start us off, we'll have Zach. You can take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. My name is Zach Mulholland. Helped start a new group in Eugene called the Bike Safety and Theft Alliance, which is made up of leaders of different groups in the area that are interested in supporting expanding bike ridership. And part of that is helping to prevent bike theft. Bike theft is a major issue here in the Northwest. So this is some of the statistics from Eugene and Portland and Vancouver from the last couple years. And these rates go up and down, but these are some of the highest rates in the nation. And it's thought that the number of bikes that are reported stolen is significantly underreported. That a lot of folks, if they have not previously registered their bike, they assume the police can't do anything. And so they just sort of give up and don't even report their bike stolen. The good news is that there's actually programs in other places that are effectively helping to reduce bike theft. So specifically going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in Vancouver, BC. If you could go to the next slide, please. So they found a number of things that have worked there. The things that we're really going to focus in on today is number 1 and number 4. So making sure that your bike racks are in prominent places where they're visible and well lit, so that someone that goes with like a grinding tool that's going to be generating sparks, that's visible and is going to bring attention, and that they'll be less likely to do that. Loaner lock programs where a business can have a number of bike locks on site. So if someone comes with their bike without a lock, that you can loan it to them. Bike valet programs. So this would be at like large local events that you can have a bike valet area that's staffed. And that's often a really good opportunity to not just have people come and park their bikes and participate in the event, but you can actually register their bikes as part of that service. And then the other thing that we're really going to be talking a lot about today is how to register your bike and how to lock your bike correctly. Theft is a major issue that's undermining our goals to increase bike ridership. And it's estimated that 1 out of 10 people that has a bike stolen will never buy a bike again, and that is permanently lost as a bike rider. So Shane and Shawne will be getting more into each of those issues of how to register and how to lock your bike correctly. The next is repurposing car parking, so converting car parking to bike parking out in front of stores. And the last is the proactive return of stolen bicycles, where local recycling programs or local police departments, if you have bikes that have been registered previously, having a system where you're proactively trying to return those bicycles to folks is a very valuable program to have. And there's 2 videos here that link and talk to when police officers from Vancouver that help set up these programs, and goes into each of these items in a little bit more detail. We can see on the next slide that they have been having success with reducing their bike rates. So 2015, they had around 4,000 bikes that were reported stolen, and in 2022, they had reduced that to just over 1,500. So this is one of our first projects of the Bike Safety and Theft Alliance, is to actually develop resources on how we can help students register their bikes and how we can help train students to lock their bikes properly. And so I'm going to pass it on to, I believe Shawne is next, and allow him to start introducing some of those materials that are available for you statewide now. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Zach. Shawne Martinez here, he, him, cycle organ program coordinator. I'm a car-free bike dad in Tigard. I've run Tigard's only bike bus, which is really fun, trying to get as many kiddos as we can to ride their bikes to school. So, but locking your bike is a very important aspect of that. So we're looking at the Safe Routes flyer here. They're talking about you lock, you lose. So I personally have a brand of U-Lock that is advertised as being angle grinder proof. It's very heavy. It's very expensive, but that is an option if you want to use like the top of the line security. They're showing here in this graphic, you can use the U-Lock to go through your rear wheel and the frame, the triangle of the bike, and then use an additional cable to lock your front wheel. And if you want to, another smaller cable to lock your saddle. And these pictures that you can see to the right are different ways that people lock the saddles to their bikes. We're talking in the comments about saddle theft. That's very sad, especially if you have an expensive saddle. There are some really expensive saddles out there. So you can see here in these pictures, some people will use an actual bike chain that you would require a bike chain tool to remove, and they lock their seat to their frame that way. You can use a small cable lock or chain lock, or use a larger cable and run that through your U-Lock as you're locking to the staple or to the bike rack. Next slide, please. These are different examples of what not to do. You can see in the first one, do not lock by the front wheel only. So someone could just unbolt, or if you have a quick release, they can just take or loosen the front wheel and take your bike and leave the wheel there. So when you come back, all you'll have is your front wheel sitting there. The second image says do not lock to an uncapped post. So this is a post that's maybe only 4 or 5 feet tall. And if someone locks to that, someone could just come up and pick the whole bike and slide the lock and the bike up and over to the top of the uncapped post, and then take the bike. The third image says do not lock by just the seat post. So you can kind of see that the U-Lock is only around the seat post, and it is not in the triangle of the frame, or one of the triangles of the frame. And that makes it so that they could just either remove the seat post or the seat and then slide your bike out of the lock, and then the lock will just be left on the rack. Going to the bottom, do not only use a cable lock. Cable locks, even the thicker ones, can be easily severed with just a pair of hand cutters that are available at a tool store. So do not just use a cable lock. You really want to encourage using a U-Lock. The next image says do not lock by the stem. So you can see that the U-Lock, even though it looks like the bike's secure, it's actually only going around the stem of the handlebars, which can be loosened. The hardware can be loosened, and then the lock can be slid off, and there goes your bike. The last image, do not lock to weak objects. So chain link, it sounds tough, right? Chain link, but it's actually very thin wire that's just bent into, for the fencing. And that's very easily cut, again, with a pair of hand cutters. Next slide, please. So the standard bike rack that we'll see often in Portland, at least, is called the staple. And it looks like a staple. So you could see I have 2 different staples here. One's on the left, and then there's one on the right. And I want, if you can, in the chat, can you see the differences between the 2 staples? If you look at the construction of the staple, so you can notice that the staple on the right, oh yes, has the crossbar. Yes, very good. So that crossbar is really important. If you're locking to a staple that does not have that crossbar, the staple can be removed from the ground, and then the lock can be slid off the bottom of the foot, basically, or the base plate. Also, the red rack is made of square tubing, and that comes into play in the next slide, please. So you'll see this upper left image. This staple that does not have that crossbar on the bottom has been removed. The hardware has been removed, and the bike has been taken. So we look for tamper-proof hardware, which is the next image. It looks like a hex or a Torx, but it has an extra dot in the center. So you kind of need a special tool, something that most people probably wouldn't have. with them. So the opportunity to remove the bike rack isn't there. So talking about the square tubing, if you look in the right bottom image, we have different types of steel that are used for bike racks. You have round, which is very common and easily bent, and it's probably the most affordable. Flat bar, and also square tubing. So what that square tubing will do is, if you see the tool to the left here, this is a pipe cutter. These are available at Home Depot or most tool places. You can use a pipe cutter to cut the round bike rack. You just do a cut. It's quiet. It's not an angle grinder. It's not electric powered. You just make a single cut and spread it out, and then you can remove the lock. So it's something to think about if you're installing bike racks. Square tube is an option from some of the manufacturers, and that's makes it just a little bit tougher to use a cutting tool on. Next slide, please. Locking to signposts. So we don't recommend this, but if you have to, sometimes there's no other option. Look for a signpost that's actually cemented, like it's in the concrete of the sidewalk. You'll see in the bottom right image, these are the newer breakaway sign mounts. And these set screws that I'm pointing at, these can be removed. If you just have a hex key or an Allen wrench, you can loosen those set screws and lift the pole out of that socket and then slide it off with the lock, and then there goes your bike. So something to think about when you're locking to a pole is, can the pole just be easily removed from the ground? Next slide, please. Renter's insurance. Hopefully your renter's insurance policy and your homeowner's insurance policy will cover any bike theft. You need to check that out, really dig into your policy. I've had to use this in the past when I've had bikes stolen. And I have actually an independent policy on my Bachfeet style cargo bike, because I also have a liability on my cargo bike. It's a large bike, and I just want that extra security of having that independent policy. I don't own a car, so none of my bikes can be covered by like an auto policy for liability. So there are other companies out there that you can have an independent bicycle policy. And I can see in the chat here, security nets are another good security measure. Yes, for sure. Yeah, we do need to use security nets on fastening the bike racks. Next slide. I think that was it, right? Yes. And I will hand it off to Shane. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Sean and Zach. Yeah, so one of the tools that is really important is bike registration. And this is because even if you follow all the great tips that Sean shared, bike theft can still happen. People, find ways around all types of security. We also see that bikes get stolen out of garages and even locked up in secure places. So it's really important, as Zach mentioned. Recovery rates really depend on the municipality and how active the police are in doing recoveries and returning bikes. But even in communities where returns are happening, that can only happen if the bike is registered, so that the police department knows who to contact. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so some cities have their own registration program. Some cities, universities, even school districts will have their own registrations. The city of Eugene had a registration program, as well as the University of Oregon. Eventually, U of O dropped theirs and went with Project 529. And just a few years ago, the city of Eugene stopped their registration process through the city, through the police department. But they still use those databases, but they also generally use these two databases, and that is with Bike Index and Project 529. And so that's really the best way, and where a lot of the industry is moving, is just registering your bike through these two platforms. If you use Bike Index, it's a nonprofit. They do cross post with the Project 529 database. If you register with Project 529, it's a for-profit company. They don't cross post over to Bike Index. So we recommend that if you register with Project 529, that you also register with Bike Index, just to cover those bases. But you don't necessarily have to. Most police departments are checking both of those. The other thing is beyond the police department is that both of these organizations have active communities who are actually using these databases to check, and that includes bike shops and local advocacy organizations use them to differing levels. Or if you are purchasing a bike on Facebook Marketplace or on Craigslist or some forum, that you can actually go on to these and put in a description of the bike and see if anything has been posted locally to see if that bike might be a stolen bike. So registering your bike is a key piece to be able to recover your bike. I have had a couple bikes stolen and did have one that was recovered by the police department, somewhat because of work we did to find the bike, but it was easy to get back because it was registered. They just looked it up, saw that I was the registered owner, and handed it over to me. If you don't have it registered, there's a lot more of a process to get your bike back from the police. Next slide. And so how do you register? There are apps and websites for both of these organizations and businesses, and you can register online really easily. The key piece is to find your serial number, and those can be located on a lot of different locations on a bike. The most common is in on the bottom bracket. So if you flip your bike upside down, you can find it there. I did find a good resource also that shows all the different locations that a bike serial number might be. And so I put that link in the chat as well. It could be on the head tube. A bike could have a couple different numbers. And if you're not sure which one is the best one to put down, you can put them all down. Just having that in the registration is great because it might get looked up in a lot of different ways. Some of these organizations have a sticker that you can then put on your bike that has a certain code that for you of a registration number that's different than the serial number and has a QR code that's scannable for people to just check and see like, okay, I'm buying this bike. I can scan this and see if it's there. Or, you know, if that sticker is still even there after the theft. But it's a good way for thieves to know too that, oh, this bike is registered. If I steal it, there's a chance that, you know, it could get reported. When EPD, Eugene Police Department, was doing their registration, their last sticker said, was this a bait bike? And they would actually put out bait bikes where they would put out a bait bike and see if a thief came, and then they would catch them in the act. And they're bringing back that program again. They were on a hiatus for a while, but now, so their registration stickers actually said, you know, is this a bait bike? And so hopefully that deterred some people from thinking, well, maybe it is, and this is a setup. Question in the chat about, can you register a hand-built bike without a serial number? Most definitely. I've done this, and you just have to put a really good description of the bike. It's a little bit harder for recovery, but if there's any kind of you know, brand or sort of signature piece to it, I'd recommend that. Like if you build a custom bike, name it something and actually put that on the bike, so that it has some clear thing that when they look up in the bike database, oh, this is the Screaming Rocket bike, and they look up Screaming Rocket, and if it's in the registration, it might come up. So that can happen. Next slide. All right, so since this is a Safe Routes to School webinar, I wanted to talk about the bike parking assessment tool that we created here in Eugene. And this is important much because of what Sean talked about of having good things to lock to. What we saw at a lot of schools was that there were old, outdated racks, wheel benders where you put the front wheel in and you just didn't have anything to lock the frame to. So even if we wanted to encourage good locking by students, they couldn't because of the infrastructure that was there. And so we created a tool to grade ourselves of how good is the bike parking at every school that we have, and what are the things that we can do to get schools up from a failing or D grade up to being A schools in their bike parking. And so this is a tool that is available on the Safe Routes to School National Partnership website. the Eugene Springfield Safe Routes to School site also has a link to it, and the examples of our own 4J, Bethel, and Springfield schools, and their bike parking tool and how it was used. I'll just run through really quick just some of the basics. Next slide. And so these are the things that we look at of how good is bike parking at a school, what kind of rack, as I mentioned, making sure that it has good locking points for locking like Sean talked about. Where is it located? Is it hidden in the back of the building where no one can find it? Or is it upfront and visible? If it's not upfront and visible, is there good signage or things that lead to it? What's the quantity? Is there a code requirement by the city? And is the school up to date to meeting that code? You can use the sample code that we have. If your city doesn't have a code for schools, the City of Eugene one is a pretty good basic level. I believe that was one for every 7 students at the school. You have to have a rack. It how much of it's covered also depending on if there's code for it, and then the security of it. Is it in a secure site, and is it visible? Again, if it's upfront right by the principal's office where they can see it and staff are always watching it, that's great. If it is hidden in the back, is it hidden in the back but it's really secure? That's great. Maybe that's even more secure. But is it out of prying eyes, and so that makes it less secure? So there's different scales for that scoring. And then accessibility has to do with how accessible is it. We've had some schools where they put their bike parking where you had to basically ride through the parking lot to get through it. And so it wasn't accessible in a safe manner. And so is there a way to build a path around or to move it so that you don't have to go through the pickup, drop off, arrival, departure, car vehicle traffic to get to the bike parking? And then equity for our scoring template at this, for our districts, we looked at the free and reduced lunch and sort of what the school score was around equity levels. And we use that more for once we wanted to make improvements, that we were making improvements at the schools that needed them the most first. And so that was just a way for infill, not necessarily to give them a score on that, but just to see for improvements which schools we would do first. There's a bit.ly link that should be working, but if not, if you just look up school bike parking assessment and safe routes to school, it should pop up. Next slide. Just real quick on these, this is some of the forms. This is a Google Doc that you can download and make your own and fill out. And you basically, as I said, put down the capacity of the school. That's the number that's available. And those are bike parking spaces. So one staple rack or inverted U rack is 2 bike parking spaces. And you fill out the capacity calculation sheet, and then that will autofill information for the other spreadsheet, which you fill out with the rack type score, the location score, the quantity score is where it pulls from the capacity, as well as the covered, and then you fill out the security and the accessibility, and you get this end grade score, and you can then work through with your facilities department to say, okay, we have 10 D schools, a couple failing schools, some A schools. Where can we find some funding to try and bring up these failing schools to have better bike parking? And what are the things at those schools that need to change to make it better? Next slide. And then, of course, there are ways to go above and beyond. Standard in our school district now for 4J at least is, and I think Bethel and Springfield are doing this too, when we build a new school and we purchased a few to do infill of these skateboard racks, ideally undercover, as Sean had mentioned, but some of them are out by the bike parking. We try and get them under the covered bike parking if we have that. These can also be used for scooters, not just skateboards. And generally they do require that you have a padlock. So some of our schools will have a padlock that you can use if you don't bring your own to help secure those. We also, have done fleet bike parking, security, some that were in old gyms that had showers before that aren't used now, and it became bike storage space. This is a picture from the Netherlands of covered school bike parking, where they actually have an area that had an entry to the school, and then they were able to close it off so it was secure, covered, really like a bike room that protected the bikes while the kids were in school, gave them a place dry to hang their wet rain clothes, and then, you know, was directly connected to the shared use path network. So, you know, that you can really go above and beyond and create a great space that shows that cycling is a priority for the schools. Adding repair stations, bike pumps, those kinds of things are great. One of the schools I had for Safe Routes to School, they had a special parent and staff bike parking area that was clearly labeled, which was a great resource. And then I just wanted to highlight in this middle one, we did do a Striving for A+ parking that dives into a little bit more. So there's a recorded webinar on the National Partnership site that you can hear exactly the step-by-step of going through that. And we also highlighted a high school that had the green team do a bike parking analysis and make improvements and do a fundraiser that they actually did crowdfunding to update their old wheel bender racks. Actually, the high school that my parents went to, that the racks were installed when they were there, and they upgraded those to staple racks through crowdfunding. So that was a pretty cool project. Next slide. And just to highlight that this is where you can find the link on the Safe Routes National Partnership, but we've also adapted this now. We had an intern who just took the school bike parking assessment and converted it to a city facility program analysis. And so we are actually currently going through every city-owned property, and that's parks and buildings, community centers, and scoring those so that we know as a city where we need to make improvements for our staff and for the public. And so this can be adapted and used for other facilities as well. Next slide. And that's it for my piece, and we'll leave a good amount of time for Q&A and discussion. And I think Indigo has some pieces too.
Well, first, Julie just asked, where did you get the 7-to-1 formula for the bike parking assessment tool?
I have to double check that. I should have known that would have come up, but it's city code, and so it's in our code, and I'll just check that that's where it's at.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got a few resources that before we go into the Q&A, I wanted to share. This came from Shift Community Cycles in Eugene. It has some information about why to lock your bike and why to use the U-lock and cable, similar to the graphic that Sean shared with us earlier, as well as this poster that has more information about registering your bike, including the QR codes to go do that. So I can link both of these in the follow-up email. We also have kind of a mixture of all of these different resources that we've been talking about. The Oregon Safe Routes and partnership with ODOT has kind of put together a statewide document flyer. So we'll have this available for digital download on our website, as well as it can having the option to order it through the ODOT storeroom as a physical copy if that is preferred. So I will share out all of that in our follow-up email, so you can have all of that whenever it feels like the appropriate time to dive into it. But with that, we can kind of launch into some Q&A and discussion. If anyone has any questions for any of the folks that spoke today about bike parking assessment tools or how to lock bikes or anything like that, or registration.
And I'll just highlight, I did look up, and it is 1 to 8, and it's not based on students, it's based on building capacity. So, you know, depending on the size of the building and what the building capacity is and what it's permitted for, that's for the city of Eugene, it was 1 to 8. Some places might be done on square footage.
Miranda is asking if there's any type of assembly in middle or high school sharing how to register bikes and lock bikes, and how to get info out to students specifically. Is that something that is happening in the Eugene, Bethel, Springfield area that you know of?
It's covered in our bike safety education program a little bit, but I don't think that I think that's one of the things that Zach mentioned, you know, that even in the Safe Routes to School material, there wasn't anything through ODOT, and that's somewhat where the material that was created locally came out of, because there wasn't information that was going out to families and students about this, and we're trying to make that more of a common thing. I think the tricky part is trying to make sure the information gets out, but it doesn't get lost in just the huge amount of paperwork that families receive, and just figuring out what is the best way to get that information out. I know that some schools in our area have taken the information and put it on posters or a sign and put that near the bike parking area. I think that's a pretty good, effective way. We also created a sticker at the city of Eugene that we would put on racks, and I think that those also happened at the University of Oregon, where they would put basic information about how to lock your bike up properly with a QR code for registration, and then they would sticker those onto racks, onto the bike racks. And I think that's a really great piece, and I think some people have talked about doing that around the school districts as well.
Yeah, I think that was my first thought, was these materials that both ODOT's put together and then Shift Community Cycles. In particular, if you have a covered bike rack area, it would be easy to put that information up. You're definitely not walking through it with students, but at least they're being exposed to some of that information. There's a follow-up question for Lindsay about including a sticker like that in the sticker contest. I think that's a really fun idea. The sticker contest, unfortunately, is closed, this one, but if there's another one, I think that that's a really fun idea going forward. Julie, do you have something?
Yeah, it's more of a, I guess, a comment, a slash question to Sean, using what Shane said about doing the locking part with the bike safety education. I purchased some locks I was intending to incorporate that in part of our bicycle education when we use the Cycle Oregon fleet. But with the littles, I didn't get to it, but I think that it would be a great addition to add to the drill guide, even if we don't necessarily have a physical thing to show the kids. It wouldn't be too hard to include it in the kit. In fact, I think you guys already did. Sean put, I didn't use them, but you included a cable lock and a U-lock, I think, in the trailer. But that's one thing that I wanted to do on the ride about, which our school didn't do a ride about, but we could include that if I did a older kids again next year. I want to make sure that our PE teachers touch on that. Not only are you teaching them how to navigate the neighborhood, but how to safely lock your bikes up, because our fifth graders, I always tell them when I'm there, guess what? You guys are potentially going to be riding to school when you go to middle school. And when you get there, you're responsible for your bikes and making sure that they're safe. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Julie. Maybe it could be an addendum to the drill guide or something that we could somehow stick in there. But yeah, that's cool.
I'll also mention, just on the lock thing, for my kids, what I ended up doing was buying 5 locks that were all keyed the same. You can buy locks from, certain lock companies or, yeah, bike lock companies. Like Avis is what we chose, and ours is actually a frame lock with a chain that connects to it. And I just had them all keyed the same, so that if there are ever issues, like just the other day, one kid's bike wasn't working, and he had to get to an appointment that another kid didn't have to get to, and I said, well, just use your brother's bike, and so he did that, and which gave me time to get over and fix the bike, and I could fix the bike because I had the key and could unlock it, fix it, and lock it back up, and like just logistics as for family biking, it's really a nice little hack. I also put in there were some comments about the cool covered bike parking. Most of what we're doing now in the city is that we're really working to get our school district to install as much covered as we can. And so in our new buildings, we're generally trying to get it almost all of the bike parking covered. But Portland had this really cool DIY that was pre-permitted of sorts, where it was an approved plan. And so if your school wanted to improve their bike parking, all they had to do was submit a permit, and this was an approved plan. And some schools got their bike parking shelters done that way. So we don't have that in the city of Eugene, but I'd love to see that happen. We just work with the school district to try to make that happen.
That's awesome. Zach, I know you've had your hand up for a little bit. Do you have something that you want to add?
Yeah, I think in terms of the question of, are there assemblies about this? I think the way we were thinking about this is, what are the opportunities to build these resources into already existing programs? So if there is a local bike giveaway or, giving away locks, how can we include the how to lock your bike as part of that training? If we're teaching students how to ride a bike, or we have a small cohort of students that we're taking on a safe routes to school trip, can we help them register their bikes and provide these materials as part of that training? And then I think the question is also for all of you is, how can we help you make these materials useful for you when you're working with students around the state? Because we're wanting to make it so that these resources are available and easy to use and easy to explain, and make it so that this information can get spread far and wide. So any insights or thoughts into how we can help you spread this type of information out would also be super helpful. And thanks for all your interest in this.
Yeah, I think the next part of the discussion that I wanted to bring up for everyone, it was to kind of open it up to the floor for something that Nora put in the chat, and then Zach has now echoed, which is what other resources would folks find helpful and useful? So I know we talked about the stickers. If there's any other graphics we think would be really helpful that we can put together, but we want to make sure that these resources are useful and that we're actually filling the need. And so if anyone else has any other suggestions for different resources that they would like to see, either throw it in the chat or you can unmute and let us know.
I think I think a great idea would not only have paper resources, but sometimes quick video links that we could share with schools, or we could even show in a class or an assembly really quickly. It would just take someone, even a rudimentary video, putting it together, and I'm not very good at that, but I've seen other schools have their students show how to do things with their bikes, how to pump up a tire, how to do adjust your seat. And I found it online. I can't remember where, but it was just YouTube videos. I think they were stored per description too. Like you could click on it. So if you wanted to click on how to lock your bike up, or show examples exactly like what Shawne was showing on why you don't want to choose certain areas or certain types of things. I'm worried about that though, because it might show people how to steal bikes at the same time. But I've learned something from this one. Honestly, I was just thinking, now I'm going to be taking a better look at all the areas I lock my bike to.
Yeah, Lindsay, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so thinking kind of about that and Miranda's question about, a sticker, I don't know that, I could have a sticker that's like, here's how to lock up your bike and have all that info, but I wonder about like a QR code sticker, maybe that's put on the bike racks, or something like that that could link to videos like that or something. And we wouldn't need to print a whole ton because you would only need, a handful of them per school. And then you could have the resources be in like multiple languages and things like that too. Um, that could be something to think about for the future.
I'm wondering too, as our city just went through a wayfinder. They put a lot of wayfinder signs around town, and maybe it could just be something that they add to areas near the bike lanes or bike racks or bike paths. It could just be an extra information like, this is where you are. By the way, have you registered your bike? This is how you can do it.
I'm seeing in the chat too, there's not to create more work for Sean and Becky, but it could be something that's added to some of the curriculum um, with the jumpstart things as well. I think maybe more so than the learn to ride, but I think that that's a great idea.
Yeah, for sure. We could, talk to, as long as the PE teachers have time to include that in a lesson plan.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
These are the stickers that we made at the city of Eugene. This is a little bit old because now it talks about because it talks about Eugene Police Department registration. But we would just change the right side thing to be a QR code for registration. But it's just the very basic piece of like, use a U-lock and this is a secure piece. So it'd be great if we could create something like this, safe routes focused, and maybe have that as material. And these were printed on pretty tough material, so that they could be stuck to a metal rack and stand up over time. Generally, they were placed on the top part of the rack. This is where having the square tube rack also helps because the rounder is harder.
Shane, how big were those? Like,
I think they were like 6 inches, maybe.
okay. Awesome. Yeah, Rachel.
So I will say in our curriculum for bike safety down here, we do technically have a section on locking. However, with the limited amount of time we have to teach the students, it's really hard to cover it. So it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just getting that in with trying to also teach them all the pieces for getting them on the road. It's really challenging.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, Sean.
I was going to share an experience just had a couple months ago. My daughter and I were at Powell's Books in Portland, and we were leaving. We rode the Bach-Feets down there, a cargo bike, and noticed someone fiddling around in the bike racks, and someone yelled at this person, and they were actually stealing an electric cargo bike from the bike racks there at Powell's. And what had happened was they were a family that rode 2 different bikes, but they only had one U-lock and one cable, and they cable locked the second bike. And the person that was stealing it cut the cable lock and took the electric cargo bike. Unfortunately, one of the two, and it happened right there at Powell's, and they have a security guard standing right there, And so, yeah, a U-lock would have made all the difference for sure.
I have a question about registering bikes for folks that have like bike fleets. I'm curious, Sean, as you are the keeper of so many of the statewide bikes, yeah, as seen behind you. I'm curious what your and Becky's protocol for doing that is. And then also curious if other folks around who have their own bike fleets are doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually do not register all these bikes. We have 430 bikes in the fleet, and we have not registered any of them. So that's a good point. I know that when you buy bikes from a bike shop, like I just bought a couple bikes recently, and it was automatically enrolled. So I didn't even have to really lift a finger. I think you just have to open the email and acknowledge that you bought the bike at that bike shop, and it's just already enrolled automatically, which was really cool. But yeah, that's a good point. But we haven't lost the bike yet. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, Rachel, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I did register all my new bikes that I've gotten, and the bike fleet I got for the high school, those are all registered on Bike Index. And I'm still trying to figure out, because I used my work email to do that. It's just kind of that part I don't like, and I'm not sure if there's a good workaround for it to be like an organizational email. Just so it's not just attached to me, you know?
That's a
Right.
good point. Legacy
Yeah.
registration. Yeah.
Rachel,
Those
can you remind me again who you're with?
Yeah, I'm just with the Bethel School District down in Eugene.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up the email situation. I know that we have generic emails that belong to the school district for receiving information, so maybe that would be something I would use if I did it.
yeah, it's definitely something I need to look into. But the fact that it does require an email, and it's just like, well, here's hoping.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the opening about how we have had a fleet of bikes stolen at the city of Eugene. It was very early on, and I'll just say we went back and forth in the early days of whether we should be putting anything on our trailer to advertise that it was a bike fleet, because like there's the advantage of it's a really visible trailer, uh, and it's promoting your cause, but you're also promoting that there are bikes in there. And we at the very beginning went the way of keeping it blank and make it less appealing. I think that was a mistake. We learned from that. I think that most of the trailers now have some sort of markings on them. I'm not exactly sure. Rachel will know, but ideally, I think it's better to have that advertising and promotion because it's also easier to find. Because when we sent out the press release about this trailer being stolen, it was, the very standard white trailer that had no identifying marks. And so all those bikes were registered. We never got any back, but I did start to see them kind of show up in random places. I was like, oh, that was one of those bikes, I think. But there were several different fleets of those. They were Bike Friday bikes. And luckily we were insured through the school district and we replaced everything through that process. But I definitely know that when I was there, we were registering all the bikes. It's great to hear that's still happening because theft does happen.
I will say, Shane, I don't think either the Bethel trailer for sure doesn't have markings on what's in it. And then I don't think Sarah might have a branded trailer, but I think most of her trailers are also blank. But Jack's, I don't remember if Jack's
Yeah,
are
I
like
think
or
the
not.
Springfield one is
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yeah, I think the Springfield one is as well.
And we did have, or like Sarah did have a problem where the trailer was parked over at, I think it was Roosevelt, and somebody broke into the trailer and they stole bikes out that way. They didn't take the whole thing though.
Mm-hmm. We did, Sean and Becky in our webinar last month talked about building bike trailers and kind of touched on different ways that you can secure the bike trailer itself. And so that can be a good thing to review as well. But yeah, Sean, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just real quick. I I think the only time that I've been concerned about losing a bike was at some of our bigger bike rodeos we've done. When we have like 50 bikes out, right? And there's kids all over the place and there's no accountability and there's just bikes are everywhere. Kids are having a blast, which is awesome, you know, and I'm just like, I hope all these bikes come back to the trailer when we're done. And they always do. So that's the only time I've been concerned though.
Yeah, Zach, do you want to add something?
Well, just really appreciate the conversation. We're going to be sending out the flyers for how to register and for how to lock your bike, and links to those videos from Vancouver. And I think just we'll loop back and talk more about how we can get some statewide stickers and talk about the video idea and see if there's capacity to put something like that together. And I hope this isn't the end of this conversation, but really the beginning of one, and can help support you all in the work that you do.
That's great. Julie?
Yeah, I know that we were talking about bike locking, and you did show a few videos, or I mean pictures of the skateboard and scooter locking ability. Definitely, I think a closer up picture of how to do that, or that is even possible, is great, because up until I worked in a school that had those type of racks, I had no idea how it even worked. I never saw it in action, and parents, I, I wouldn't even know how to send my kid with the right tools to lock up a scooter. I would just think that they bring it into their classroom. And nowadays, unless you're in elementary school, and even in elementary school, they don't want those scooters in their classroom. It becomes an issue. And I've talked to many kids about at least hanging it on the rack, because our scooter racks are inside our building, most of them. Um, and so at least if they hang it, it's inside. Doesn't stop kids from stealing it on their way out, but I haven't heard of any walking away from the inside. So definitely, I feel like the scooter, we have a lot of scooters and a lot of skateboards, and electronic scooters. I don't even know what the rules are on that, but I've seen kids riding with those, and they're so big they have to stay at the rack, and I don't really even know how they lock those up. I've seen them just put a cable around it over and over, and honestly, that'll just slow someone down. So there's something to it, but keeping everything safe.
That was a wrong screen share, but that was a funny one I want to share. But just on the e-scooter thing real quick, there are some racks now that are being made that are e-scooter specific.
Oh,
I haven't seen these installed anywhere, but this is one brand. Dero is making a decent one. The University of Oregon has these because they were starting to see more and more of these. Some people just use the rack at a bike rack to lock up, but you can see here, this has a special spot to nest your handlebars in there and then use a lock. Again, ideally a U-lock, because any cable locks will get cut, but I haven't seen these installed at a school yet. This is a good picture of where the U-lock goes to keep it secure. So these have been used for shared e-scooters, but also just personal e-scooter uses as well.
That's great.
that's
Thanks.
great. I think our last question before we wrap up here is from Abby. Wondering if anyone's come across any visuals for locking up scooters at schools, and that's actually not something I've come across. So I'm curious if anyone else has seen those.
I haven't. That's a good idea.
What is a good idea? Okay, well, I'll add that to the list of things that we can start developing to share with you all. But I want to go to our announcements here just at the very end, just wrapping up. Thank you all so much for that discussion. That was great and given us a lot of resources and tools to look into creating for everyone. This month, April, is Earth Month, and so if you have any events that you're doing, make sure to register them on our website so that we can track them and help celebrate them with you. The May Walk and Roll Day is coming up soon on May 7th, and we have our incentive ordering open. Make sure you order by April 30th to ensure that your incentives get there in time. Next week is our annual meeting, the Friday of Oats. So it's going to be April 25th from 9 to 12:30. There's an optional lunch and then afternoon trading there as well. So make sure you register for that so we know how many to plan for. We also are going to be doing a happy hour on the 24th at Ron Tom's in Portland. So if you're up for Oats or just coming up for the annual meeting but going to be there a day early, you can go to that, and there's no registration for that. We also have our May webinar, which is going to be a share out from the innovation grantees from the last round of the last grant cycle. And we also have a de-escalation training run by the YMCA that's going to be happening on May 27th. Sean, do you want to take this last second to plug the Cycle Oregon event next Saturday?
Oh, sure. The Cycle Oregon Community Block Party is on the 26th, and I always get the location wrong, though. It is at, sorry, I got to pull it up real quick. You can go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to get it in time.
No, it's okay. I'll
Saturday the
send,
26th.
yeah, I can send the flyer out. But so if you're going to be in Portland for Oats and the annual meeting and all these things, we can keep the fun party going on Saturday with a Cycle Oregon event as well if you're there. So, thank you all so much for being here and being so active in this conversation. And oh yeah, Nora, thank you. We also have the high school video contest starting May 1st. I have the information in the email already. So similar to the sticker contest, but this time it's going to be a video contest where we're going to ask high school students to take videos about their commute to school. So we're going to get to see a fun new perspective from that. So we're really excited about that. So we'll be sending out more information. We could give bonus points for having a high school video contest about locking your bike up. That would be perfect. Or your scooter, even better. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you hopefully next week for the annual meeting and next month for the next webinar. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much to our speakers.